Hello everyone and welcome to your video lecture series on Unreal Engine. Throughout this 5-part series we're going to look at some pretty amazing qualities you are able to get out of Unreal Engine 5, including both in the film pathway and in the model pathway. Everything that we can do in Twinmotion, we've just got that little bit extra control. So the lighting looks better in Unreal Engine, the materials look better in Unreal Engine, the depth of field, the camera, you've got so much more control, you can make things so much more cinematic in the film pathway, and you've got more control of the cameras. In the model pathway, the interactivity, our ability to do things like we would in a game, i.e. jump from level to level. If you want to be able to jump from one side of your building into the next side of the building as a layer of interactivity, you can. We're also going to have a look at what's called procedural foliage, where we can create objects in the background as we move forwards. So we don't need to create an entire forest. It'll look like a forest, but as we walk, more and more trees are going to be spawning over in the background, or more and more buildings spawning over in the background, or more and more characters spawning in the background. Anything we want, we can make it procedural so that it grows as we move forwards in the model, and therefore use less computing power to an even greater result. If you're interested in particle physics, things like oceans crashing, things like fire growing, things like buildings crushing, we can do all sorts of stuff in Unreal Engine. We're also going to look at three-dimensional soundscapes, so we can place sounds in specific locations, and as we get towards it, it gets louder, and then as we get further away from it, it gets quieter again. We can make a whole range of different sounds, so we can hear water rushing, we can hear people chattering and talking, maybe a specific character as we walk past them, they're muttering in the street, whatever it might be. You can make sounds three-dimensional and interactive so that only engaged as you engage with them. Effectively, everything we can do in Twinmotion is even more customizable inside Unreal Engine 5 and even more detailed in terms of the layering of what we can do. There's an embedded complexity, that's where the customization comes from, which can scare some people, but this 5-part series is about demystifying all that complexity and giving you a skill set of Unreal Engine so that you feel confident moving forward and that you feel confident taking the challenge. Over the last 6 months, I've spent hours, days, weeks scouring the internet, scouring forums, scouring YouTube to collect all just the necessary content that you need in order to give yourself a strong, confident base and skill set. So rather than going out there and looking at YouTube and getting overwhelmed by just how much you can do in Unreal, I've concentrated it down to just its core elements. This video series is a distillation of the best bits I've found on YouTube, the best tips and secrets I've seen in the forums. It also comes from students via online and OUA who had a go before and let me know where all the pinch points were for them. And that way we have an architecture student perspective of what they need to know versus all of the other stuff out there. And finally, Isaac and I entered an international architecture competition and used Unreal to start to test and explore how we could best visualize our architectural scheme. That way we have a lived experience of exactly what you're about to go through. So this video lecture series on Unreal has distilled all of that information, all of that experience down into 5 chunks. Now my focus is that this is totally appropriate for both film and model pathway students. The first 3 videos are for everybody. Video 1, we're looking at the interface and how to get started and breaking it down into just that first chunk. How do I get my model from Rhino into Unreal or Revit or whatever you're using? And how do I get started? How do I navigate around? What's the basics, the absolute basics I need to know? Then we look at all of the critical ArcViz stuff, lighting, artificial lighting, materials, assets. Then finally we move on to camera direction, how to set that stuff up, how to get a really cinematic, beautiful render if you're in the film pathway, or how to set up your cameras so that it looks really good in the model pathway. And finally, the 4th and 5th videos are dedicated to the model pathway students, how to embed amazing interactivity. We are using a game engine, so how to start to use that stuff. And number 5 goes through how to package and export your model as an executable so that anyone can play your model as a game and they can walk through around it in real time, or they could look at it in virtual reality, or they can experience your architecture in real time. The important thing to note about this 5-part series is that it does not supersede the actual lectures. So the video lectures that we have, which are based in Twinmotion, they teach us the fundamental principles. They're not actually about learning Twinmotion. So lighting looks at lighting. It might refer to Twinmotion sometimes to give you a visual of how lighting actually works, but it talks about the overarching principle of lighting. So you still need to watch that series. You still need to understand the principles of arc vias, but then you apply that knowledge inside Unreal through these videos. So when you and your team are ready to start to set up your lighting, you first watch the principles video, which is in Twinmotion. Go through it 2x speed, I don't care, get through it in 20 minutes, but you need to understand it. Then you can jump to the Unreal video where we look at the specific techniques of bringing amazing lighting into your Unreal model. So if you are taking the challenge for Unreal, make sure you're watching both the principles and the specifics of Unreal. I don't care if you watch me at 2x speed to get through it. It is important that you hit those core learning outcomes and that you understand the overall principles, because when this software dies, when something else happens, moves away, if you go to a practice that uses a different type of software completely, it's important that you understand why and how it works rather than the nitty-gritty of the techniques of the software. Big picture is critical. Make sure you understand that stuff. So finally, to summarize, this video series is a distillation of all of the stuff out there about Unreal Engine. It is incredibly daunting if you just try and go out there and learn it yourself. So trust in me, watch this 5-part series first, and I promise you it will show you just the core stuff that you need to know so that you can give yourself confidence. Then once you have that confidence, you can start deep diving wherever you like into YouTube to find specific elements that you need for your model to make the most immersive experience possible. All right, without further ado, let's get stuck into getting started with Unreal Engine. All right, first thing we need to do is download the Epic Games Launcher. It's where obviously we're going to be launching our Unreal Engine. You can launch Twinmotion from there. It's where you download everything, download your plugins, download the apps, download free content. Epic Games Launcher has everything in there for us. Once that is downloaded, open it up and sign in. If you don't have an Epic Games account already, no problems there. It is free. Just go ahead and make an account, and make sure you make an account as a maker so that you can make all of your stuff and access all of the stuff for free as well. I'm going to sign in now. Okay, and this is what Epic Games will look like. Let's make that bigger. So we've got a few tabs up here, obviously new samples, blah, blah, blah. Marketplace is where you can download lots and lots and lots of free content. So once you start getting stuck into Unreal Engine, there's all sorts of things you can get for free. Obviously start with the free stuff. Some things you might want to buy, don't go crazy, of course, but you can add all sorts of things into your model. Your library is where all of your projects are going to be stored. Got the vault here with different plugins you might want to add. So for example, if I want to download a bunch of trees to add into my project, I can find in the marketplace a specific type of tree that I like, download that, and then I can add it to the project that's in there. Got all my projects there. Twinmotion tab, of course, if you want to download Twinmotion as well, you can do that too. What we want to do is go over to the Unreal Engine tab, download the latest version of Unreal Engine. So yours won't say launch, yours will say download, something like that. And make sure it's Unreal Engine 5.1. That's what I'm going to be using for the videos. Go ahead and download that, and we can jump on to the next chunk. Once you have downloaded Unreal Engine, go ahead, go back to your Epic Games Launcher. If you're not there already, go into Library and click on Launch. Once that's loaded, that brings up the dialog box, which shows a bunch of different templates. I'm going to talk about that in a second, but most importantly is right here, our project location. Unreal Engine files are massive. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that doesn't come with Twinmotion, but gives us so much more control over how things work because it's a game engine software, not just a visualization tool. That means we need lots of storage on the computer. We're talking about 100 gigabyte is the average that students who have done this in the past, and I doing this in the past, have experienced. So you really want to make sure you at least have that amount of space on your hard drive, or what I recommend, because we're working in teams anyway, is you actually go and get something like this. I bought this just for my Unreal Engine work. It is a 1 terabyte SSD external hard drive, and that means I've got plenty of space to put all of my work on there. And it also means if I'm going from a computer at home to a computer at uni to somebody else's computer, I don't have to worry about migrating all the time. But as you can see, these are getting cheaper and cheaper. This is an SSD, so solid state. It's not like the old school external hard drives. SSDs used to be really expensive. Now for $170 delivered, you get a whole terabyte of SSD and it fits in your pocket. it's pretty amazing. So I would definitely recommend. It's going to be a savior for you all the way up to thesis. This is going to be something that you need and something that is going to make sure that you're keeping all your files and that you've got backups of everything. I just recommend it's time to get something like this if you don't have one already. All right, back to Unreal. Okay, so then onto the templates. So the main two we're looking at, if you probably guessed it already, is games and architecture. So you can look at film if you're in the film pathway and you want to take on the challenge to get into Unreal Engine. You can use one of the film templates. However, I recommend going into architecture and using the ArcViz because you can very, very easily bring your cameras into ArcViz. However, there's more stuff missing that you're going to need to add in if you're using a blank template from the film and video. So I recommend if you're in the film pathway, go to the ArcViz template and that'll have most of the stuff that you need. If you are in the game or the model pathway, we're going to be looking at the first person. The reason why we don't use the architecture ArcViz template if we're in the model pathway is because it's very easy to bring all of this stuff in anyway. In fact, this template building, these dodgy looking trees, we're not going to use that anyway. We would be deleting that as soon as we get into there. Water we can bring in. We can bring in landscape and constructed stuff like this, bring in background environments, bring in the sky. That is much easier to do than setting up all of the blueprints, i.e. all of the logic, for this first person to be able to walk around inside your space and to see their arms while they're moving around. We can delete the guns straight away so we just see arms. That is what we want to be working in. For the purpose of this short introduction series on Unreal Engine, I'm going to use the first person because, as I said, it's a lot easier to add all this stuff that's going to be missing from the ArcViz than it is to add in this stuff. They're going to look effectively the same in terms of the aesthetics when they come through. The only difference is I'm now going to be able to see the person walking around and I'll be able to walk around in real time, which may be useful for people in the film pathway anyway. So what we're going to do is click on first person. We're going to make sure we're on blueprint and then we are going to navigate to our external drive. So go out to folder, PC, external drive. Notice I've got plenty of room left on here for my Unreal Engine projects and nothing left on here. Okay, select folder. Give it a project name so that you can all remember it. I'm going to call mine House of Shadow and first person. FP for first person. You can't have any spaces in there. It doesn't like certain characters, so just try that a few times until you get one that works for you. Ray tracing I am going to enable. Blueprint I'm happy with. We don't want to use C++. Blueprint is what we use to put together our interactivity when we get down the line. And for now we are good. Cool. Click create. That will take a little while to load in. You have to be patient with this one. It's not going to happen straight away. It may take anywhere up to 15 minutes to bring all of the different assets in, to make all of the files and subfolders onto your hard drive. So you just need to give it a little bit of time. I will go ahead and fast forward this once it is open and ready to go. Even mine took 20 minutes to load there, so don't worry if it took you a little bit of time. Once it's open up, it'll probably open with the plugin window. If it has, we're just going to close that down. Don't worry if it hasn't. We're going to come back to our plugins in just a second. So this is what your first person template should look like. Should be able to go and have a look around in here. And this is our interface for Unreal Engine 5. So first things to wrap our head around is how to look around and navigate. So with our mouse, if we click and hold the right click button, that allows us to look around. So clicking and holding the right click button, that allows us to look around. If we click with the left click button, that's our selection tool. So any left clicks are going to select things. Any right clicks is how we can look around. If we want to navigate through the space, we need to keep the right click button down and then press the WASD keys. So WASD is going to allow you to navigate around, and then while you're holding down the right hand mouse key, you can move your mouse around and then use your WASD keys to navigate as you're doing that. The Q key will go down, the E key will go upwards. So WASD and Q and E are all of your navigation tools, but they only work if you're holding down the right hand mouse click button. So for example, if I was to click on this object here and then press the W, E, R keys, you will notice that it's actually changing something completely different. So WASD is not going to work if I don't have the right hand mouse click selected. So W allows me to move things along the axes, so I can move in the X, Y, and the Z. E allows me to rotate through those same axes, and then R allows me to scale through there as well. If I instead have my right hand mouse click down and I'm pressing W, it's not going to change that or not going to edit the other thing. So just keep in mind, having that right click button down on your mouse is going to enable movement. If you take your finger off, that is when you are now editing. So right click, moving, no clicking, editing. Just keep those things in mind, and that will allow you to navigate pretty freely. The actual interface itself is pretty straightforward, standard to lots of other softwares we've used before. So things up the top, your file, edit, window, all of that sort of things we know that we've seen many times before. That is where you can find a lot of your major tools and your big changes. Things like your plugins, your project settings, editor preferences, all that sort of stuff in edit. Your building tools, we'll come to all that stuff later, so I won't go too much into there. Further down a little bit, we've got a few more sets of tools. So at the moment we're in selection mode, which means that all of these tools up here are going to change relative to that, and also the interface is going to change. We can then go to changing the landscape. So if we want to construct a landscape around here, foliage, if we want to add a bunch of trees and plants in a very, very quick way by just adding assets to a brush. Mesh painting, modeling, fracture brush editing, animation, that is all up there. Most of the time we're going to spend in selection mode, and so you'll see my interface typically will look like this. On the left hand panel we've got our place actors, and then within these little boxes here we've got some different categories. So all of the stuff you use all the time, brand new folder, so I've got nothing in there yet. Basic ones, if I want to add an actor or a character, if I want to add a point light, a player start position, all of the basic things. Our lights, very useful. We've got some basic objects, so if there's something you need to be able to add very quickly, you don't want to go back into Rhino and put it back in, we can just add a cube, for example, if we just need a surface to be sitting in the distance or something to add a material on it. Cube, easy, ready to go. Cinematic, so we can add some tracking cameras, that sort of thing. Visual effects, now this one we're going to use quite a bit, so we've got probably the main four, and the top here we're going to use a lot, and they're going to impact our lighting a lot. So these four up here will come in handy. Post-process volume, sky, atmosphere, volumetric cloud, and exponential height fog. We will talk about a lot, not just yet. Geometries, volumes, and then all of our classes there as well. So typically I'll leave it on basic just for now, and then most of the time you'll see me probably in visual effects if I'm editing any of this stuff here. Otherwise I might just want to add some shapes in, or if I'm experimenting with lighting, adding light in, I'll leave lighting on. Down the bottom here we have got the content browser. This is all of our folders of where everything is kept. The best way to think about Unreal Engine is that it's a very, very hyper organized folder system. And the reason why we do that is because there is just so much going on within the model. It's not like Twinmotion where there's only a handful of things that go in there and therefore only a handful of things to get lost. There are millions of things to get lost inside here. So everything is very, very clean. Everything is very, very organized. At the moment, we haven't really loaded anything in there. So this is all just the default stuff that comes in. For example, if I click on first person and then my blueprints, I've got the rifle, which is down there. We can see it at the moment. Which is this one here. So that has already been loaded into the content folder, and that's where that's come from. So all we're looking at down here is all of the information that's inside your library. That's it, just a series of subfolders. We'll create our own subfolders in a little while for our own assets. So we bring in things like our levels, maybe our materials from Quixel Megascans, a few other bits and pieces, but we'll get there in time. Over on the right hand side we have the editor itself, and the editor is very similar to maybe something like AutoCAD or Rhino, where if you select on something it's going to change what we see inside the details. So if I select on the gun here, it changes what the details are. If I select on the cube, it changes once again what the details are. The editor is very, very intuitive and clever. It has a search function which is specific to what we are looking at. So for example, this specific cube, if I wanted to type in material, it's going to jump ahead to the material section on there. If I wanted to type in something like shadow, it would bring up all the settings for the shadow of that particular object that we're looking at. Very, very clever in the way that you can search within the properties of any one object, which makes it so much easier to edit. Probably the scariest thing about Unreal Engine is just how much stuff can fill in this detail section, particularly things like our sun, our directional light. There's so much we can edit inside here. So being able to quickly, let's say for example, I want to play with the light shafts. I type in shaft and it brings up that specific dialog box and I can edit all of those things in there. So having that keyword will make life so much easier and much less scary for you. If you can think of what you're trying to do, type it into the search function and you'll be able to edit it directly inside the details panel rather than having to scan through all the time. Over to the side of our details is the world settings, so pretty straightforward. The details is of the specific thing we're looking at. The world settings is the overall world that we're inside of. Let's chuck that back onto details. We don't really need to be looking at world settings too much at the moment, so details is where we're going to be. Above that, the outliner is almost exactly the same as, let's say, Photoshop layers or Illustrator layers, something like that. If we find an object, grab its layer and then click on the eye, that will toggle it on and off and hide it. Very, very straightforward. As per the content folders down here, the content folders inside the outline are all very organized as well, because once again, it's very, very easy to get lost and just have way too much stuff going on here. So you can create a new folder just up here, and then you can drag and drop all of the stuff that you've made inside that folder. Otherwise, you can select a whole bunch of it using Shift and then right click down to move to and create new folder inside there as well, and that'll move everything that you've got selected. A beautiful part of the outliner is that if you happen to get lost inside the editor, if you want to jump to a specific part of your model once it gets massive, let's choose something else down here. If we click F while we have anything selected in the outliner, it will jump us to that specific object in space. Very, very useful. Very, very handy to be able to navigate around to specific areas. So rather than doing your WASD all the time trying to navigate around to a specific object, if you already know the name of that object, just click inside the outliner on the object, click its layer, and then press the F key to be able to bring it back in. So these objects that we have here and these little strange icons are called gizmos. And the beauty of Unreal Engine is that things like the game controller, which is where we're going to start from when we start our game, things like the sun, things that we do need to have inside the model but don't necessarily need to see while we're editing, all are gizmos, and therefore if we hit the G key, G for gizmo, that will hide them, that will toggle them on and off for you. So they're still there. We're still going to start from this location when we start. However, if I want to be editing and I want to see what it's going to look like, I don't want to see any of those gizmos in the way. I just want to be able to see the architecture that we're looking at. So G allows us to toggle those on and off. Up the top here, we've got a few different functions. We've got things like our camera speed, how fast are we tracking around. What I like to do with my camera speed is I toggle it through the scroll wheel on my mouse. So if I scroll backwards, you will see my camera really slows down. If I scroll forwards, I can make it go quicker and quicker. So doing that allows me to change the camera speed very, very quickly, or the tracking speed as I'm navigating around, get something that I'm comfortable with. We've got scaling options. We've got the degrees that it locks into place as we're rotating, all of that sort of helpful, useful stuff up there. So remember, W, E, and R are these three up here. W to move, E to rotate, R to scale, and we're on our selection. Then over on the left-hand side, we've got a cluster of different items here. The first one, show. These are different things that are active and some not active inside the space at the moment. So for example, atmosphere, I'm going to come up a little higher over here so we can see what I do. If I click show and then I turn off atmosphere, we'll see that it turns off all of that surrounding environment around. Basically, we have complete control in Unreal Engine of what we do want to see and what we don't want to see. Another example is if I turn the collisions on, we'll be able to see if we go down to any one of these objects where we aren't going to be able to walk through. So if I'm a character, I'm not going to be able to walk through this box here because its collisions are in place and they're wrapped around invisibly around these objects. And you can see that's meshing all the way through these different objects around here. So if I turn that off, collision, I don't need to see that. I just need to know that it's there. So if at any point I need to see whether or not my collisions are in place, I can quickly just go there to show. There's a bunch of other stuff down here as well that you can show. Basically think of things that are either visible or invisible inside your scene. They typically are found in show. One that is not in show that often people want to have on their screen and they get confused by because they look for it under show is show the FPS or show the stats, things like that. So for example, FPS says our frame rate. My frame rate is currently at 24 seconds because I'm screen recording at the same time. That'll jump back up to normal if I wasn't, but having that on screen allows me to see how complex my model is getting while I'm editing, so I don't get too crazy with things. I want to make sure that I'm hovering above that 30 FPS mark when I'm doing my editing. I can turn that back off if I want to over here, show FPS. In that dialog, I can also change the field of view of the camera. I can create some new cameras. So if I want a specific camera to be in a location where I can come back to it at any time, I can create a new camera, or I can create a cinematic camera if I want to create a render out of this place. And then once I have that, I can go and take a high resolution screenshot by doing a screenshot multiplier. Again, we'll get to all of this stuff later, just letting you know where it is. Perspective mode we're in at the moment, so this just says our type of view. Again, very similar to Rhino, we can just choose what view type we're in. Lit, this is similar to the shading type mode that we might have in SketchUp or Rhino, something like that. So what do we want it to look like? Do we just want to have the wireframe version? Do we want to have the unlit version? Do we want to be able to visualize what's going on with nanite? I don't know if there's any nanite in this template yet. Let's have a look. No, there's not, so we won't see anything. Lit is typically what we leave it on for most of the time. That's telling it to make sure it looks like what it's going to look like when we're actually rendering out the final version. If you want to have a go at playing in this first person game template, you can go ahead and play. There's a couple ways to do that. We can go ahead and click on play, and that will jump us to that spot. And then we can just go ahead and navigate around. Because we're playing in a game now, our navigation does change a little bit. So instead of having to click on the right hand button, we're in the game already. So it's not about selection and editing. We can just move around. This is just the default template game, so we can go around and we can click, for example, if I want to shoot object like that. Sorry, that's very loud. Hopefully not so much in your ears. And then when we're ready to exit out of it, just click on escape. We can also click anywhere in the space. Let's say, for example, I'm back over here, right hand click button to be able to navigate again. If I want to start from here, I can click on right click and play from here. And that is going to go ahead and start me in this space instead. We'll notice that my collisions are on because I can't go and walk through this wall. And I'm also not sinking through the floor, so I can jump up into this space here as well, and I can jump over to that box there, right? So that is all working properly. Click on escape. That's our default interface. One last thing I want to show you is just this handy little button up here, which is your quick add to the project. This is where we're going to be adding a lot of different things, and so rather than navigating all the way through, we can just come back up to here. An important one for us when we're going to be adding materials in later is Quixel Bridge. Once we've signed in there, we'll be able to navigate to all sorts of free assets that are available to us. Quixel Bridge is full of stuff that is super useful to bring into your model. You download them as assets, then you change them around, edit them as necessary. More importantly for us though is the surfaces. We go down to the surfaces. This is where we're going to get all of our Megascan full HD 4K resolution material, sometimes 8K as well. So for example, if we want to click on concrete, it will have heaps of different examples of concrete for us with subcategories as well. So things like cast in situ, damaged, dirty, painted, or rough. I'm going to go for a smooth one. Click on the one we want, change it to highest quality, then download it. It'll take a little while to download depending on your internet speed. And then when you're ready, you'll click on add, and that will bring it into your engine folder. We'll go through more on that and more on how to bring materials in and edit materials once we get to the later videos. Alright, so now we're getting a little bit closer to making this into our own model. What we need to do first is go and enable some of the important plugins before we can get started. So go up to Edit, Plugins, and then in the search bar up the top, we're going to type in a couple and turn them on together. So I've got my GPU, I'm going to go GPU Lightmass. Click on yes, it's fine, it's just saying it's in beta version. Don't worry about that, it's all good. We're going to turn on Water, Experimental, and Extras. This is going to allow you to add water into your projects. And the last one I'm going to do is type in Datasmith, and we want the CAD importer content for Datasmith importer. Datasmith importer, there's this one here. Let's do the FBX as well. We're not going to use it, but I'm going to do it so we can show you what the difference is when we get to later versions. Now, as you can see, there are heaps of different plugins that we can add inside of here. As you go through YouTube and teach yourself more things which are specific to your type of project, you'll learn different plugins. There'll even be plugins you have to go back into the marketplace to download, and that's fine. This is the process to do it. So you go up into Edit, go into the plugins, come into here, search for it, turn it on, and then it'll ask you to restart so that it can install those, and then they'll be there when we're opening up next time. So now that we've got those in, again, you can come back here at any point to load in other ones, and we might even add some more in class, which ones are relevant to you guys that we think you should add as well. But for now, let's go ahead and click restart now. Give that a little while to reload. Again, this can take a little while depending on your computer. Hopefully it won't take the full 15 to 20 minutes this time, but we'll give it a little bit of time to load. All right, we're back in Unreal Engine now. Close down the plugins page just to make sure you can see what's going on your screen. Looks pretty similar to what we had before, except there's going to be a big key difference for us, and that is this button up here is now going to have Datasmith inside there. And we'll notice that we had two options, and if you remember, there was one where I said we're not going to use that. So you'll see a lot of people online who talk about the direct link. Direct link to Revit, direct link to SketchUp, direct link to Rhino. And what this does means that one click from Revit or whatever you're in will automatically flow down the pipeline and update in Unreal Engine. The problem with that is the link breaks. Trust me, it breaks. It's broken before when I'm a week into a project and unfortunately didn't have a copy of the Unreal Engine file saved yet. Same thing happened with Twinmotion as well, actually. And then it basically corrupts the file and you can't get back into it again. It's really, really frustrating. And because we are on a very tight time frame, because we're students and things like this do happen and they get very much stuck in the way, I have to say, do not use the direct link. We're going to use file import, which means we click one extra button, but that one extra button mitigates all of the risk that comes with the direct link. So we're still going to save our Rhino file or save our Revit file, but instead of having to click one button from Rhino or Revit and then come in here and it's updated, we have to save it in Rhino and then go and update it inside here with one extra button. So we'll be using this one here, file import. So let's go ahead and do that now. Click on file import, and I'm going to navigate to a project of mine, which is in a Rhino format, 3DM. Okay, here's the Rhino file that I want. I double click on that. It's going to ask me where I want to put it, and I realize already I've made a mistake because Unreal Engine, we need to keep everything organized. So what I'm going to do first is get out of that. I'm going to come down to my content drawer down here, right click inside of there, and I'm going to make a new folder. This one I'm going to call Datasmith Rhino Model. There we go. And that way I'm going to be able to find that very, very quickly. So we'll go back up again. Let's do that now that we've got a file to put it in. Datasmith, file import, navigate to the model that you want. This one here, click open. It's going to ask where we want it. I want to put it inside Datasmith Rhino model. Click OK. This dialog box will open. There isn't too much we need to edit right now. We can play around with tolerances and things like that, but generally speaking, the default settings will work for you. Click on import. And once again, this is going to take a little while. Now, the first time we're bringing it into Unreal Engine, it has to bring in all of the objects that you have inside your Rhino model, and it'll take a little while. After that, it's only really updating the things that are missing or things that have been changed since the last time it was saved. So don't worry too much about how long it takes to import it the first time, because it'll be much quicker when we're just making small changes incrementally as we go. Let me zoom through this. And here we are, and we'll notice down the bottom right hand corner of the screen, it's still loading. It says it's preparing the mesh cards, things like the shaders and stuff like that. And as exactly the same in Twinmotion, we want to have objects on different materials so that when we add a material to it, it's not going to make everything exactly the same. If it's all grouped as one object, for example, this green thing here is just one object, I'll only have to apply the material once to it. If each little item is its own individual object, then they all need to have materials applied individually. But again, I'll get through into materials and how all of that works in a later video. So that is our model come through from Rhino. If I jump back to the Rhino model, you'll see, yep, that is the model in full there. And I just want to explain how to update the model so that you can continue working, continue developing in real time. What I'll do is I'll delete something that's massive and obvious, like this bridge that we have here. That's gone. I'll do file save, give that a second to save. And then once that's saved, jump back into Unreal Engine. And then all we need to do is right click on our Datasmith and just click on re-import. Click on import. We don't need to change any settings. Give that a second to load, and we'll see it will be much, much faster than last time. And there we go. It's gone. I can bring that back in Rhino, of course. Control Z, save it, back to Unreal, right click, re-import, click import, and then in real time it will bring it back in for us. And that is all we need to do. There it is. All we're doing is adding one extra step. We just have to do right click and import if we use this version. Whereas if we use the other version, the direct link, we just have to press go from Rhino or Revit, SketchUp, whatever we're using. But I promise you, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt if you do that, because the link will break eventually and it will cause all sorts of issues for you, especially if you're sharing models around. Just use the file import. Everybody's working in the same file inside Revit or Rhino, whatever you're doing. Only one extra step, right click, re-import, and it's going to save you so much stress down the line. If we go over to our outliner here, or the layers tab, whatever you want to call it, we'll notice that we now have a huge number of different objects inside this space, and we can press the F key to jump down to any one of those and see what's going on. Very, very helpful. However, it's clogging this guy up over here. There's so many new objects in there. If at any point this opens up and you can see every single individual object, very, very straightforward to close it down. So I go back up to its original file. Museum of Emotions is the name of the Rhino file. And then I just click on the little arrow next to it, and we'll see that that's cleaned that up a lot for me. And then just as easily, I can either click on that to open it, or if I click on any object in the scene, it'll automatically take me to that object inside the layers anyway, and I'll be able to find that in the outliner. Now that we've got our model in, we can navigate around it and go and have a look at everything, and looking pretty good. Looks like everything is there. Obviously materials are not in place yet, still looking pretty ugly, but all of the objects that we need to be there are there, which is great. We can go and fly around. Everything that's looking like it is in the correct position. Perfect. All right, so we've had a fly around. Everything is looking like it's in the right place. Before we wrap up the interface video, I want to show one more critical thing, which is going to make life a lot easier, and that is setting up levels. Now, in the next video, we're going to look at setting up your lighting, your materials, your camera direction, all of that kind of stuff. A big part of that you'll notice in Unreal Engine is we're going to have very, very specific control over the lighting, for example, and our interior scenes and our exterior scenes, or even one exterior scene to the next exterior scene, are going to feel very different and are going to need very different controls depending on what is going on. So the beauty of Unreal Engine, because it's game design software, is we can actually break it up into different levels. So a good example here is I could have one level for this archy vaulted pool space, one level for this bridge, one level for this space at the top, and then one level for this subterranean bunker. And that's exactly what I've got. Let's go have a look. So here I have my pool space, and if I jump back out to my levels folder, so this one's a little bit further along, you can see it's getting a little bit bigger in here with more stuff happening. So that is my pool. And then if I jump to another level, I've got my tunnel inside this space along here, and I can move around inside here, and you can see I've got a very different lighting condition going on inside there, so that needs to be separate. I can then jump all the way up to that scary bit up the top, and I can go look around, and that is going to have different lighting, it's going to have different clouds, all sorts of different stuff going on there because we're up high in the sky, so that needs to be separate. And then I've got an interior space, which of course needs to be completely separate. So if I navigate around inside here, and I'll spend more time going around inside this space when we get to the next video, but we'll see this space very much is got a different lighting condition. We've got quite dark in the corners, and then I've got this bright light coming out through here telling us where to go, and this God ray coming down into the center here, illuminating some of the artifacts, assets, objects, materials, etc. going on inside this volume. So the beauty of Unreal Engine is that we can actually split our model into different levels, which means I can have one set of assets running on this first level, a different set of assets, a different lighting, a different time of day, whatever I want on the next level, a different set of views, a different set of everything in each level running through here. That is not only going to save you a lot of computing power, it's also going to give you a lot of control over what things look like without having to constantly adjust settings all the time. You can set the settings the way you want and then just jump into the next level when you're ready. Ultimately, the big thing for us though is because we're working in teams, you can just tell each team member to work on a specific level. So once you have your file set up, once you have some levels in here, which I'll show you how to do in just a second, you can say, okay, Sophie, you're going to work on the tunnel level. Christina, you're going to work on the pool, and I am going to work on the exterior, or however you want to split it. You can break it up to each person is working on a different level within the file. Now, with that in mind, there are obviously going to be issues with you working on separate computers and bringing stuff in. Working on individual levels is going to make it a little bit easier because you're less likely to interact accidentally interact or break an instance of somebody else's part if you're all working on your own scenes. However, inside Unreal Engine, if we go back to our content folder, we can also grab any folder we want and do what's called a migrate. So each of you could create your own subfolder, which has all of your stuff that you're working on, not only the levels, but all of the assets, everything that you're doing. Then when you're ready to go, as we get towards the assessment submission, you could simply right click, migrate, and take that into a common Unreal Engine file that is saved on one of your SSD hard drives, and you can bring all that together into one file. There will of course be some editing, some moving around, some making sure things are flowing nicely from one to the next. So you will need to allow some time for that to migrate things in properly. But that is going to be your workflow to make sure you can all work individually. So the first thing will be setting up levels, making sure you're working in different parts. And then the second thing will be working in folders so that you can bring it all together and make sure everything's going to go to the right location when you tie all of your folders into one place, into one Unreal Engine file. So very quickly, before we wrap this up, I'll show you how to make a new level. You won't really need these yet because you actually need to do some stuff first. You need to make some materials, need to set the lighting, need to do some camera direction, whatever. The stuff that we're going to get to in the next video. It would be more important to make your levels after that so that you don't have to do it twice. But I'll show you how to make some levels now so that you can get organized. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you how to make a new folder first because you won't have a levels folder yet. So just right click anywhere inside the content drawer, and then we're going to go up to new folder, which is this one here. Call it levels, then double click inside levels. And all I want you to do is right click and go level. And then let's just call this new example. I'll click on that one, and then I'm going to double click on new example. It'll ask me to save the level that we're already in, very normal. And then here we are, we're inside a new level. So it's completely black at the moment because we don't have any sky set up, we don't have anything set up at the moment. So the beauty of working in levels is I can quickly jump back into another one. If this one has got pretty good setup, I'm going to be working on another interior for the next level. I like the lighting and what it's doing for this interior shot that we have here. What I can do is I can go up into the outliner, grab everything inside of here, make sure your folder's open. So make sure, for example, if I want to bring in all of this Rhino model as well, don't leave it in the closed position, otherwise you won't be able to select it. So open it up first. Go all the way down to the bottom, press on shift, and then click everything. Oop, do that again, up to the top, shift, grab everything. Then I'm just going to go Control C. Cool. Once that's done, we go to new example. Yep, save selected, that's fine. And then back over to the outliner, click in there first, and then hit Control V. And once again, it's going to be the waiting game, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 15, somewhere around that. We'll migrate everything over from one level into the next level so that you can start using all of the stuff that you've already got there. And then you simply delete the parts you don't want. Here we go, it's already in there for me. We can delete the parts we don't want and keep the parts we do want. So if I click on here and press escape, then we just need to navigate to the space that we were looking for, and it's brought the stuff in that we needed. Then we simply just go through and delete all the stuff that was specific to the previous level. So for example, if I had a bunch of cameras set up that I don't need on this new space, and actually the interior is all the way over there, so I don't need the foliage and all the rocks, so I've deleted all of that stuff. Can delete this person, delete everything that we don't actually need for this new level, and then we just start building in the new content for this new example level that we've made. At any point, we can jump between levels, of course, so save selected. That's going to save that new level example that we just made, and then I can jump back into this space, do any editing that I need to do. Once we've got a level that we're happy with and we want to duplicate it exactly, there's an even quicker way to do that. We can right click and click on duplicate, GE interior, that's fine. It's going to be number 1, and then I click on that, save selected to save the one that we're currently in. and then this will become an exact copy of the one I had before. That's a faster way. So you can either drag and drop the specific stuff you want to take in and copy and paste that into the new level, or you can duplicate the level and delete stuff out of there. And then we have our levels in our folder there, so we can jump between them just like this, and we can have the spaces set up so that they are each independent from one another. That way they have their own specific lighting, specific cameras, specific everything, and it'll look the way we want it to look. But also, it's not going to crash my computer because I don't have all of these things running at exactly the same time. Definitely a working strategy for you guys to separate your chunks out into levels, make your computers run faster, and make it easier for you to work independently on your own specific parts of the project. Alright, that is it for your first lecture on Unreal Engine. Congratulations on making it to the end. Now what you want to do is exactly what we went through. Go ahead and try and import your own model into Unreal. Have a go at navigating around it. Have a go at the interface and all of the different things that you've got there. Play around, have a couple of minutes in there, and then go ahead and move on to the next video where we'll have a look at all of the basics of ArcViz so that you can start to make your model look amazing. That's all for now. Happy importing.